What if a single sentence could stop you in your tracks and make you rethink everything you thought you knew about yourself, about life, about the way you've been carrying your burdens? Johnny Depp has this rare ability to say things that aren't complicated or dressed up, but they stick. They haunt you in the best way. You hear them once, and they echo in your mind days, weeks, even years later. And maybe the reason they stay with us is because they don't come from a script, they don't come from a desire to sound profound. They come from a life lived, messy, complicated, beautiful, tragic, and real. Johnny isn't the kind of person who tries to present himself as flawless. He never has been. He's made mistakes, he's been through trials, and he's walked paths most of us can only imagine. Yet in the middle of all that, when he speaks about life, it doesn't sound like Hollywood. It doesn't sound like a carefully polished line. It sounds like a man who has been through storms, who has been broken and rebuilt, and who has found truths along the way. And those truths? They're not meant to impress you. They're meant to remind you of what you already know deep down but maybe forgot. One of his most haunting lines is this: people cry, not because they're weak. It's because they've been strong for too long. The first time you hear that, it almost sounds too simple. But then you start thinking about all the times you've cried, and suddenly it clicks. How many times have you held everything in all day, telling yourself to stay strong, to smile, to answer, "I'm fine," when someone asks, even though inside you're not? And then at the end of the day, maybe when you're alone in your room, maybe when no one is watching, you break down. You cry. And you tell yourself that it means you failed. But does it? Or does it mean you've been strong far longer than anyone realized, carrying more weight than most people could handle, and that moment of release is your body's way of finally saying enough? Think about it, crying isn't the weakness. Crying is the evidence of how strong you've been. The tears don't mean you fell apart. They mean you endured. You carried the burden, you wore the mask, you fought the fight, and then finally, your heart said it was time to let it out. That's what Johnny was pointing to. He wasn't shaming the tears. He was honoring the strength it took to reach that moment. And when you realize that, maybe the next time you cry, you won't hate yourself for it. Maybe you'll see it as a badge of honor. Proof that you've been strong for too long. Then there's another line of his, one that people come back to again and again because it's so piercing. You can close your eyes to the things you don't want to see, but you can't close your heart to the things you don't want to feel. That one hits in a way that's almost uncomfortable. Because isn't that exactly what so many of us try to do? We close our eyes to the truth. We look away from pain. We distract ourselves, bury ourselves in work, drown out the silence with noise, anything to avoid what we don't want to face. For a little while, it even works. You can scroll for hours. You can binge shows until you forget what you're feeling. You can even convince yourself that you've outrun it. But your heart? Your heart knows better. No matter how tightly you close your eyes, your heart will always whisper the truth. You can't silence it. You can't trick it. And that's the haunting part. Because it means that sooner or later, those feelings will come back. They'll surface in dreams, in memories, in little moments when you least expect it. You can't escape them forever. And maybe that's what Johnny was really saying, not to be afraid of those feelings. Not to run from them. Because in the end, your heart always wins. And wouldn't it be better to face it now than to keep pretending? This quote is one that doesn't just sound good on paper. It applies to real life in the deepest way. How many of us have tried to pretend we don't care when we actually do? How many of us have buried love, grief, fear, joy, because we thought ignoring it would make it go away? But the truth is, it never really goes away. It waits for you. And when it comes back, it's even louder. So maybe the lesson here is to stop running. To sit with the feelings, even the uncomfortable ones. Because only then do we start to heal. And then, just when you think Johnny's words are only about pain, he flips it again with something that feels like pure freedom. He once said, "I think everybody's weird. We should all celebrate our individuality and not be embarrassed or ashamed of it." How refreshing is that? In a world that constantly tells us to look the same, act the same, dress the same, speak the same, here comes this reminder that weirdness is not a curse. It's a gift. Think about your own life. How many times have you tried to hide something about yourself because you thought people would judge you? Maybe it was a hobby, maybe it was the way you laughed, maybe it was just the fact that you didn't fit into the mold around you. And how often did that hiding drain you? But what if instead of hiding it, you celebrated it? What if the very thing you thought was embarrassing is the thing that makes you unforgettable? Johnny himself is proof of this. He never played by Hollywood's rules. He didn't chase the safe roles. He didn't try to be the polished leading man. Instead, he leaned into the odd, the eccentric, the unexpected. He gave us characters that were strange, quirky, even uncomfortable at times. And that's exactly why people loved him. Because he showed what most people are too afraid to show, the parts of himself that didn't fit. And in doing so, he gave permission for everyone else to embrace their own oddness too. So maybe the real power in his words isn't just in hearing them, but in living them. Imagine if you actually believed that crying is not weakness. How differently would you treat yourself the next time you broke down? Imagine if you believed you can't close your heart to feelings. Wouldn't you stop wasting time pretending you don't care, and instead face it head on? And imagine if you actually celebrated your weirdness instead of hiding it. How free would you feel? That's why these words haunt us. Not because they're depressing or heavy, but because they linger. They stay in your head after you hear them. They whisper to you in moments when you need them most. When you feel weak, they remind you that your tears are strength. When you try to run from feelings, they remind you your heart won't let you. And when you're ashamed of your quirks, they remind you that individuality is the best part of being alive. And maybe that's why Johnny's words feel so different from the endless quotes you see floating around online. They're not theory. They're not recycled ideas. They're lived truths. They come from someone who has been through some of the highest highs and the lowest lows, who has been adored and attacked, who has walked through chaos and still found reasons to be honest. That's what gives his words weight. They don't just sound good, they feel real. And maybe the haunting part is this: once you hear them, you can't unhear them. You'll carry them with you. The next time you catch yourself judging your own tears, you'll remember. The next time you pretend you don't care, you'll remember. The next time you try to hide your weirdness, you'll remember. Because that's what truth does, it follows you. So maybe the challenge for all of us is to not just listen but to live it. To stop apologizing for emotions. To stop running from feelings. To stop hiding the parts of ourselves that make us unique. Because that's the kind of life that feels real. That's the kind of life that doesn't just pass by, but actually matters. And if Johnny Depp, a man who has walked through fame, pain, triumph, and trial, can live with that kind of honesty, then maybe we can too. Maybe it's time to stop pretending, stop chasing perfection, and start embracing what makes us human. Now here's the question: which of his words hit you the hardest? Which one is going to stay with you after this? Because chances are, one of them already has. And if this spoke to you, let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts, because I'd love to hear them. And if you want to dive even deeper into the stories and lessons that most people overlook, stick around. There's another journey waiting for you, and it might just change the way you see everything.